Welcome to The Conflict, a YouTube channel dedicated to explaining the history of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. My name is Dr. Arnon Degani, and I'm a historian. So we have the Zionist settlers' claim, saying they are the descendants of the ancient Israelites who lived in the land of Israel. And this claim is backed by genetics. But the genes used to prove the connection to the land of Israel are, well, from Palestinians. This means that the Palestinian national myth, that they are a people who were here a long time ago, also contains a truth. So how deeply rooted are the Palestinians? Naturally, many people moved through Palestine as different empires conquered it. Christianity replaced Judaism as the dominant religion, and then Islam, carried by tribes from Arabia in the 7th century, took over the country. But there's no reason to believe that the population was entirely replaced from the time of the ancient Judean and Israelite kingdoms. The root Palestine, Palestinians, comes from Philistine, a coastal-dwelling civilization contemporary with the Israelite kingdoms, which the Romans used to name the land on the southern coast of the Eastern Mediterranean, or the Levant. Once the Arab armies conquered the area, it was bunched together with today's Lebanon, Syria, Jordan into Bilad Hashem, the land on the left. That is, the left of Arabia when facing the sunrise. But despite all the changing civilizations, the term Palestine continued past the Romans and the Byzantine eras into the Muslim empires and the Ottomans, the last Middle Eastern Muslim empire, which also noted the region as Palestine in their maps. The biblical locations, the holy sites for all monotheistic religions, the crusades that claimed the land in the name of Christendom, and the Muslim reconquest of those lands, all of these contributed to the idea that the land is distinct and important. It's a holy land. At the center of all of this holiness is the city of Jerusalem, the site that holds the Dome of the Rock, where the Jewish temple once stood until the Romans destroyed it, and the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, the supposed site of Jesus' crucifixion, burial, and resurrection. Pretty important to all Christian denominations. Then, according to Muslim tradition, Muhammad made Jerusalem, which in Arabic is called Al-Quds, the Holy One, he made it the first direction of prayer before switching to Mecca. Also in the Muslim Quran, there's a story of Muhammad taking a fantastic night journey on a winged horse and reaching an area known as Al-Aqsa, the farthest edge. And from that point, he ascended to heaven to speak to God. Muslims today believe that the platform of the Temple Mount is where this event took place. And upon that furthest point, they built the Al-Aqsa Mosque. The site, however, is mostly known for its more appealing Dome of the Rock, which years later became a symbol of Palestinian nationalism. In any case, proximity to Jerusalem also created a distinctness to the surrounding land. In the mid-19th century, the Ottomans created a Jerusalem administrative province controlled directly through the capital, Istanbul, and it was centered around the Holy City. It included this larger chunk of the land, which the Ottomans called Palestine. So, by the time the Zionist movement begins its settlement activities, there might not be Palestinian nationalism, but there is a sense of Palestinianist based on living in the Holy Land. But this fact that there is no Palestinian nationalism, that does not mean that the people of Palestine have no nationality. Throughout the 19th century, the Ottoman Empire embarked on a modernization process along the lines of what was going on in Europe. The state began to cultivate the concept of Ottoman citizenship, detached from membership in the Muslim faith. Regions in Palestine sent representatives to an Ottoman parliament. These developments seated in the provinces a sense of belonging to the Ottoman state, which developed also in the face of the West's encroachment on Ottoman territories and markets. Understanding that the tides are turning against the Ottoman Empire and its territories, Palestine included, the Ottoman citizen began to develop a patriotic sentiment. And finally, we have another element in the mix: Zionism. Without a doubt, the arrival of a trickle of Jewish settlers created among the Palestinians from different cities and towns a sense that their land was coveted by outsiders. The size of the first Zionist settlement numbered between 25 and 35,000, and already, as soon as they came, some friction began to occur between those that recently arrived and those who were there before. You see, back in the 19th century, the idea of land ownership and land as commodity was not well ingrained among the peasants of Palestine. The modernization reforms we mentioned before also encouraged peasants who were working plots technically owned by the state to register them as private property. Frequently, these peasants were not interested in having their name exist on some government registrar of lands, which would enable the state to tax them or conscript them to the military. So, they'd often defer to a dignitary, someone with finances, to have the lands be registered in his name and then pay him some sort of rent instead of paying it to the state. These big landowners sometimes did not even live in what became Palestine, and for the peasants, not much changed. But now the land under their feet was someone's private property that could be sold. Zionist land buyers did not want land as a form of investment. They wanted to settle Jews upon them. And that is how the first Palestinians were displaced by Zionism. This is the first symptom of the conflict. Yitzhak Epstein, a prominent first Aliyah settler who noticed the problem, said this in the 1905 Zionist Congress.
At a time when we are feeling the love of the homeland with all our might, the land of our forefathers, we are forgetting that the people who live there now also have a sensitive heart and a loving soul. The Arab, like any man, has a strong bond with his homeland. The lower his level of development,
yes, we're not talking about some woke activists.
And the more narrow his perspective,
yes, we're not talking about some woke activists.
The stronger his bond to the land and to the region, and the harder it is for him to part from his village and his field. I can still hear the dirge of the Arab women on the day their families left their village of Juana, today Rosh Pina, to settle in Haran, east of the Jordan. The men rode asses and the women walked behind them, bitterly weeping, and the valley was filled with their keening. From time to time, they would stop to kiss the stones and the earth.
So this account, by a Zionist, is an early warning of the looming conflict. It doesn't, however, mention the Palestinians as a nation, but rather as a group of falahin, or peasants, who have religious and ethnic ties to their environment. Take a look at this petition, discovered by historian Yuval Ben Basat, written by a tribe of Bedouins that was displaced by the settlers of the Moshava Rehovot. Full disclosure, that's my hometown. In this petition, we can see the petitioners refer to themselves as the Bedouins who lived in tents in the Khirbe from olden times, and address the Sultan directly to intervene on their behalf. They came, the Israelites, the Jews, have chased them away and prevented them from cultivating the land. But they don't see it as a national conflict, nor one between foreigners necessarily and locals, and they are open to receiving some other land from the Sultan as compensation. They say they are loyal subjects of the Ottoman state and have no expectation of receiving anything in return. these are not yet members of an offended nation. But if we fast forward from 1890 to 1913, another petition was sent to Istanbul concerning a violent clash between the same Rehovot and an adjacent Arab village of Zarnuga. The incident left an Arab and a Zionist settler dead and resulted in tremendous hostility between the two sides. A few days later, a Jewish guard in Rehovot was found dead, possibly an act of Arab revenge. Then, the two sides held a reconciliation, a sulh ceremony. But this time, the petition sent to the Ottoman government in Istanbul came from representatives of several villages who had a mouthful to say about all the Zionist moshavot in the area and the way they treat their Arab neighbors. And this time, there weren't only petitions. We know that there was coverage in the Arabic press of the time. You see, the Ottoman Empire of 1913 was not the one of 1890. In 1908, a coalition of liberal elements known as the Young Turks conducted an anti-despot revolution in Istanbul. Once they deposed of the Sultan Abdulhamid II, journalism began flourishing throughout the empire and in Palestine. That wave resulted in the creation of a new public sphere and a mass of new consumers who were more aware of what was happening around them. One of those newspapers, Palestine, founded in Jaffa by a Christian Arab, took a serious interest in the plight of the Arab Muslim peasants. We can see how the newspaper reacted to the incident between Rehovot and Zarnuga.
What is intriguing about the foreign Jews who reach us after being expelled, humiliated, and despised is how they quickly turn, thanks to the lenient nature of the local population, into our masters who are stronger than us and who look down on us with a look full of contempt and scorn.
This is beginning to sound awfully similar to what we know today as the conflict. But also, notice how this newspaper, published by a Christian from Jaffa, writes so passionately about Bedouin tribes herding camels, and he uses the language of us, Arabs, versus them, Jews. Is this full-blown Palestinian nationalism in the form of an independent Palestine from the river to the sea? No. But this is definitely the infrastructure upon which Palestinian nationalism will be built. As long as there's an Ottoman Empire, the Arabs in Palestine would not imagine an alternative political framework or state. By the way, many Zionists, including Herzl and Ben-Gurion, the first Israeli prime minister, they too believed that Zionism would be fulfilled via an autonomous state under the Ottoman Empire, not an independent Jewish state. By the time of the fall of the Ottoman Empire, feelings of anti-Zionism were vibrant among the Arabs of Palestine, who realized that this movement was a problem not faced by Arabs elsewhere, but the process that placed the Arabs of Palestine on the direct path of demanding a Palestinian state would be, of course, the creation of Palestine. Like so many other modern nations around the globe, European colonial conquest, division, and rule were the key ingredients to the formation of Palestinian nationalism. When the Ottoman Empire sided with the losers of World War I, it was essentially doomed. And during the war, the European powers of Britain and France decided to divvy up its Arab regions. The French wanted control of the northern part of the Levant, and the British coveted the southern part and Mesopotamia, or Iraq. The British, who were working very hard to hold the line in the Western Front, were searching for allies wherever they could find them, and they found one in Mecca, where the Sharif Hussein agreed to join forces with the British and rebel against the Ottomans. Hussein's tribal armies prevailed with the help of this guy, Lawrence of Arabia. In exchange, the British promised the Sharif a grand Arab state in the northern Levant. In 1918, Sharif Hussein's son, Faisal, whose forces conquered the region, proclaimed the Arab Kingdom of Syria. At this point, Palestinians' nationalistic loyalties were diverted from the Ottoman Empire to that short-lived Arab kingdom. Short-lived? Yeah. Remember, Britain also promised this part of the world to the French, who were not willing to let the Arab nationalists stand in the way of their imperial ambitions in the Levant. So, they got rid of Faisal pretty quickly. But don't worry, the British would compensate Faisal with Iraq, and his younger brother Abdallah would get this area, east of the Jordan River, or Transjordan. And what about this area, between the river and the sea? Oh, that would be Palestine, or more accurately, the British Mandate of Palestine. There you have it. Palestine, as a separate administrative unit, was created. All over the world, many of the states we have today were formerly colonial provinces administered from an imperial center. In French Algeria, an Algerian national movement arose, and it became Algeria. In British Kenya, a Kenyan national movement arose, and it became Kenya. In British Palestine, a Palestinian national movement arose, but the state of Palestine had yet to have been created. Don't worry, many episodes in the series will be devoted to that. But to begin to answer the question, we have to understand what was that mandate that the British had over Palestine. And so we have to go back into World War I, when Britain, the biggest and strongest country on earth, was fighting hard against the Germans, the Habsburgs, and the Ottomans. As its forces entered Palestine from the direction of Egypt, the British decided to issue a declaration of support for the Zionist movement. In November of 1917, Lord Balfour, the British foreign minister, sent a letter to the Zionist Federation of Great Britain via Lord Rothschild, a prominent British Jew. The letter states,
His Majesty's government favors the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people, and will use their best endeavors to facilitate the achievement of this object.
Why did the British do this? Well, some credit needs to be given to the Zionist activists in Britain, like Nahum Sokolov and Chaim Weizmann. But at the end of the day, the British were out there for the British. By 1917, it became a bit out of fashion for European empires to subjugate entire peoples just because they could. And by adopting the Zionist movement and help with solving the problem of persecuted Jews in Eastern Europe, the British could gain a foothold in an area they deemed strategic and implant there a loyal ally. This is a huge deal for Zionism. The world's biggest empire that just took control of the land of Israel is supporting the Zionist project. And that's not all. When the war ended, the winners created the League of Nations, a precursor to the UN. It was the League of Nations that entrusted Britain with governing Palestine according to certain conditions. Like all mandates of the League of Nations, the British mandate was supposed to usher Palestine into self-rule and maybe independence. But the mandate for Palestine also borrowed wording from the Balfour Declaration and ordered Britain to, quote, be responsible for placing the country under such political, administrative, and economic conditions as will secure the establishment of the Jewish national home. This gave Zionism not only the backing of the world's biggest empire, but also that of the young international community. In Palestine, news of the Balfour Declaration added jet fuel to the crystallization of Palestinian nationalism and set the Palestinians and the British on a collision course. There you have it. Palestinian nationalism was created out of a confluence of circumstances, only some of them relating directly to Zionism. And yet, as we will see in the coming decades after the beginning of British rule, Arab nationalism and Palestinian nationalism were intertwined. For instance, the representative body of the Palestinians during the years of the Mandate was the Arab Executive and later the Arab Higher Committee. Does this mean that Palestinian nationalism was weak, inauthentic, fake? No. To understand why the Palestinians continued to hold on to Arabness as a source of identity, we have to think about the context. We know that during those early days, Zionism was not at all dead set on a Jewish nation-state like the one that was created later in 1948. But whatever Zionists were envisioning, they saw it happening in a land of Israel or a Palestine which was separate from its surroundings. British rule was also based on separation between Palestine and the rest of the Levant. So if we factor this, we can understand that to resist British rule and Zionist settlement, the Palestinians found it essential to demand to remain part of the Arab world and not give an inch to those who wanted, at the time, to have the Palestinians sever their ties with the surrounding societies. Why is this important to know? If at the end, Palestinian nationalism became centered around the creation of an independent Palestinian state, a nation-state. As we did with Zionism, we need to avoid conceptualizing the two sides of this conflict as fixed in their objectives and even identity. As we will see, so much of what the two sides feel as their core values is a product of the evolution of the conflict between them. Next episode, we'll look at the evolution of the conflict during the British Mandate. If you like our content and you want to support us, please subscribe to The Conflict.